Good evening and welcome to this broadcast of Going the Distance Together, where you get to ask your school leaders important questions. We have Chief Frank Kitzerow here with the Palm Beach Schools Police Department, and we are delighted to have him here because, again, we are going to be answering your questions about school safety on this Facebook Live. Just go ahead and post your questions, and we will go ahead and ask the Chief those questions. Chief, thanks so much for being here. Are you definitely looking forward to the Thanksgiving break?
I am. Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate the time. And yeah, I'm hopeful I get a whole week off, but seriously doubt it.
Well, you know, you and your department definitely work very hard to keep our students safe. The first question I want to ask you is, you know, how much has your department grown since you became chief? And, you know, what are those successes that you're most proud of?
So our department has really grown quite significantly over the last 26, 27 months. During that time, I've hired over 180 new officers. So we've more than doubled in size. And as you know, this is the first time that in the history of the school district police department that we're covering all of our schools, all 187 schools over 2,300 square miles with our police officers and only our police officers. Typically, we've had to rely on other agencies to help us. So that's a pretty big accomplishment. We've had a great opportunities over the last couple of years to leverage some significant technology that enhanced our radio communications, abilities to speak to our officers in schools. We now have roll call every day, and for those that ever watch law enforcement shows, it's usually the briefing that starts right before the shift. Well, historically, we've not been able to do that because our officers go direct to the schools. Now, using electronic means and software, we have roll call every day for our folks, and which enhances our our abilities to provide for security. And one last thing I will tell you is that it's more than just having a school police officer at a bus stop, for example, or at a drop-off point. We work diligently in the prevention, intervention, and diversion arenas to keep things from happening. Right. And have a really robust toolbox, hopefully, that will never have to open in the event of a catastrophic emergency. So those are some of the highlights. I
mean, really, your time as police chief has been defined by, the incident at Marjory Stoneman Douglas. There's been a lot of things that have had to be put in place afterwards. Can you talk about how that's really changed the focus of school policing, but still not forgotten some aspects of it?
Well, that's really a great point. So I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the Marjory Stoneman Douglas, event. That's really what drew me into this position. I had a good police chief's job. I loved the community that I was with, but this was really a calling for me, as it is for our superintendent, Dr. Fenoy, and so many others. And so that has been a big driver. And so when we look at the events that happened there, there's a lot of lessons to be learned about communications and notifications and response. And you look at the officers that we've hired, for example, they've committed themselves to the mission of keeping our children safe, and going down that hall by themselves in the event a catastrophic emergency happens. That's a pretty tall order when you think about it. And so everything that we're doing, we have one single-minded mission, and that is keeping our students safe every single day and our staff and faculty safe every day.
And you really have built this mantra, though, of that we are all school safety. Can you kind of explain, to our audience what that means?
That's a really good point as well. So one thing about safety and security, it can't be a program. It has to be in your culture. It has to involve everyone in our schools. And so, as much as people like to say, well, I'm school safety, well, I am school safety, and you're a school safety, and so is every student and every teacher and every parent. We all own school safety, and we all have that common mission of keeping our children safe. We have 197,000 students, in our school system, and I can feel the weight of every one of them. And so it takes all of us to work together to keep them safe every day.
And as you mentioned, again, it's making sure that the doors are closed so that single point of entry is still valid at every school. And not only that, it's students or parents in the community reporting things to something like Fortify, right?
That's yes. And so we spend a lot of time working after school hours, doing what we call threat assessments. And those folks, these are the folks that are threatening to do harm to our schools, to our children, to those types of things. And you make the threat, we're coming to see you in the middle of the night. Because before the sun comes up every day, we need to know the status of every one of our schools, that they're safe, and that our children, when they arrive on those campuses, are going to be safe. We work all night long. We work 7 days a week to accomplish that. So it's a pretty big task. We would never be nearly as successful as we would without the parents and the students and everybody working together with us.
When you talk about that tall order, of course, of going down that hall if they need to, talk about the caliber of officers that you're attracting, because again, there's been a lot of positions that you need to fill, and you've done it in a short period of time because again, there's a lot of people who are attracted to these positions.
The caliber of people that we're attracting has just been remarkable. We have former SWAT people, we have former police chiefs, we have law enforcement executives, we have career law enforcement officers who are coming here to the Palm Beach County School District and committing themselves to this mission, in large part because of the reputation of our department and our district. But most of all, they want to contribute, and they feel the calling as well to protect these students. And I'll say it again. You think about this, and hopefully we never have to go through this, but while everybody's running in one direction, that officer is going to go down the hall by themselves to take care of that business. That's a pretty big commitment. I'm very proud of them.
Your officers are truly serving as role models to many of our students. They're building relationships with them. Talk about how that relationship building is helping and also encouraging students on their own level to become officers.
So I really think, as we face the future challenges in our country and we're thinking about different ways that the police departments work, I really think that at some point in time people are going to focus on school-based policing. I've been in this business 40 years. I've been a police chief for 18 of those years. And what's really remarkable about school-based policing, it's altogether different. We do value those relationships. We look at things differently. We measure things differently. We're not all about arrests. We're about keeping our schools safe. But we're about problem solving, collaboration, working with safe schools and our principals and our students, and that's how we build these models moving forward. And you go down the hall of a school and you see your school police officer there. It's remarkable, from elementary on up to high school, how much those students gravitate to that officer. And I would venture a guess that a lot of the folks that are listening in could probably remember the name of at least one of their school officers as they were growing up. I know I can.
Yeah. We actually have a story that we're posting next week right here on the Facebook page of a student who remembered the officer on their campus, and we reunited them together so that they could see that student that became the officer and is now in your own police department.
It's remarkable, isn't it? That's a great story, and that's how we build our future, and really that's how you build the future of law enforcement in our country.
To our youth, anything you want to say about, you guys certainly have a relationship in the educational part, the choice programs. Some of them are getting involved with our criminal justice academies. Anything you would say to our youth who are interested in law enforcement?
So what I would say to them is this: just as we are working today to model the way for you, you need to work hard, continue through the processes. You're our future. And so, believe it or not, even in the environment that you're in now, you're modeling the way for other students that are coming up and along. So be passionate. Remember this. You can do anything you want in this whole wide world, and don't let anyone ever tell you you can't. You can be whatever you want, and you just got to work hard to get it. And we're here for you.
I love that you say modeling the way, because it reminded me of something else that I saw on social media, and it was one of your officers, again, assisting a child with the hand sanitizing. COVID, of course, has changed the dynamics of our schools. You've certainly been at the forefront of that. How are you contributing to that effort in keeping students safe in a different way, and how are your officers helping as well?
So it's a constant reminder. You got to constantly remind folks about the importance of social distancing and masks and those type of things. But again, they're going to look to you, and if the officer's there modeling the way for that and practicing social distancing, that's very, very important. This goes to the heart of the mission that I was talking about a little bit ago, is keeping our children safe. And that means keeping them safe during this COVID-19 pandemic. We've kind of become the expert at COVID-19 school buses and COVID-19 classrooms and football games and hurricane shelters and But it's a new way of thinking, and together we're going to manage our, to navigate through this. And what I do want to remind folks is to be diligent. And someday we're going to look at this in the rearview mirror and say, we've made it through this. But don't let your guard down. Be strong and follow your social distancing and all those CDC guidelines. It will make a difference.
Certainly. And have you reminded principals and other members of the community that just because COVID is going on doesn't mean that the other threats are disappearing?
Well, yes, we do that regularly. As a matter of fact, I'm really proud of the fact that I actually have a principals advisory group. And I work with principals representing the high school, middle school, and elementary schools. And so they help me communicate that message. I'm able to understand from their perspective the things they need from us. But overwhelmingly, we drive home that, the safety of our children. It's focus on those prevention, intervention, diversion, safety, security, unified command, reunification, technology. There's a lot of moving parts to this.
Your department, of course, I know that sometimes active shooter is really the thing that many people gravitate to, but like I mentioned, there are certainly other issues that continue in the background, such as making sure that kids are safe on cybersecurity, right? Can you talk about how your department is taking a proactive approach in making sure that kids are informed and making the right decisions?
That's extremely important, especially now in this virtual world. And so, it's not like years ago where you could go home and be away from all the threats and problems out there. We have to pay attention to cyberbullying and cyber crimes and all those things. So we work closely with our ESE department. We work closely with our colleagues in the law enforcement profession to educate our children about the importance of remaining safe online. We take the time to educate our parents, make sure you're paying attention to what your children are doing, what sites they're visiting, all those types of things. And so you have to pay attention to all of that. And it's an ongoing, it's constant. You have to keep educating. Most importantly, if there's a violation or of law, any of those things, we're quick to follow up on it, and we'll bring whatever resources we have to bear to keep our children safe and keep them from being victimized.
Have you seen an uptick, though, in the amount of cyber, security, red lights, I guess, the things that we would be concerned about that you've had to address?
Yeah, I think we've seen it nationally, to be quite honest with you. I know at least in this state we have. And so, yes, we've seen some of the victimization that's happening online. Again, I mentioned cyberbullying, those type of things, but also cyber crimes, identity thefts, all those things that may not necessarily be tied to the students in our school, but it certainly affects their parents and families. And so, we've seen, I think, law enforcement in general, this country in general has seen an uptick in those things. And it is a challenge that we're going to have to face well into the future.
I want to invite the audience again that if you have any questions, you can certainly ask Chief Kitzerow. He is here to answer your questions live right here on Facebook. One of the questions that I had is mainly about back to the expansion and the changes that you've inputted. People might not know what the Tactical Operations Center is and about the other centers that you've developed and expanded to make sure that your officers are supported and have the resources. Can you talk about the importance of having those established for the development of this police department?
Yeah, so we've worked very hard over the last couple of years to build the infrastructure, if you will. I had mentioned earlier about the importance of understanding the status of our schools every day before the sun even comes up. And so, that is, a lot of that is done through technology. In the Tactical Operations Center, for example, we monitor the pulse of the school district every day. We can see everything from where the school buses are at a moment's notice, where our officers are. We monitor what calls are coming in. We're looking at doors and alarms and who's screening in and out, and and a multitude of things. And then every day, as I mentioned before, our officers go through a briefing. And so in that briefing, they're provided with the current conditions, anything we need them to watch out for, local information bulletins that come from our colleagues, because you have to remember that our schools are a microcosm of the communities that we serve. And so in many cases, what happens in the community will carry over into a school. And so that collaboration between the school police and local jurisdictions and our sheriff those are really, really important. And the same thing with radio communications. We've enhanced our radio communications. We're able to communicate within the schools now, and strong partnerships with our staff at the schools, and then threat assessments. As you know, people, you have to really be able to differentiate between those people that are making a threat and those people that actually pose a threat. And so we work very hard to make sure we clearly understand that and eliminate the fundamentals of those people that are posing the threats.
Most definitely. And again, a lot of the things that you just mentioned is really important because of the collaborations that you have with all the various departments. You just talked about mental health, which of course your team is hand in hand with the department we have here at the school district. And that very department is also involved with cracking down on vaping, which was a big issue. Have you seen that go up or down in this year?
So we've seen it go down in large part because we don't have the population that we had on campus last year. And quite honestly, I think with all these masks and everything, I think that's kind of impacting. Our students have been doing a remarkable job of, wearing masks and paying attention to those type of things. And, and getting to that partnership, that mental health partnership, we actually have a behavioral services unit where we partner law enforcement with our mental health professionals so that we're not only investigating the potential crimes, we're understanding how we can diffuse whatever the grievance is by working through the mental health pieces. So in general, what happens is the police investigate the crimes and the mental health folks work with the people so that together we can diffuse whatever is getting ready to happen.
Speaking of partnerships, you recently had a news conference at district headquarters where you announced the active shooter hostage event response agreement. Can you tell the audience what that is?
So that is an agreement, and this is really quite remarkable, and this shows the commitment of first responders in our county. So one of the things that I noticed when I first came here is that we didn't really have that strong of a collaboration in regards to responding to a catastrophic event, and we needed to strengthen that. So I put a work group together and invited members of fire rescue, law enforcement. We had trauma centers there. It was an interesting group of people. And from that, we all agreed that we have to work together to establish protocols and criteria ahead of time so that when we respond to significant or catastrophic events, that we're all working together, that we're speaking the same language, that we know how to operate radio communications, we know who's in charge at what time, what time of the event, and a host of other things that typically, it's been my experience, that when you get to a major event, those things need to be worked out on the scene. It's time consuming. We've committed ourselves to working those out ahead of time. We're training people in all of our departments across, all the jurisdictions in our ASHA policy, and we're committing to doing that in advance. Quite frankly, if we get a catastrophic event, and I hope we never do, time is not our friend, and the quicker we can get to the work at hand, the more lives we're going to save, and I'm convinced that this collaboration will really save lives one day if we ever need it. And I couldn't be any more proud of my colleagues, from fire rescue to, to law enforcement agencies, to school police, to our sheriff, for all the work that they've put into this. It's really quite remarkable. I don't think there's anybody else in the state that's doing this. And
certainly sharing resources is beneficial as well, because there's assets that they may have that we need and would like to use in these events, right?
Yeah, so there's assets, there's information that flows back and forth. One thing that I have learned in my short time, my few years here as a police chief in the school districts, it's way different than anything you can imagine. You've got to work in the district to experience and understand it. And I kind of joke with the principals on my principal advisory group. They're teaching me to speak principle, and I'm teaching them about security. And so it's a great relationship. And so, yeah, you really have to work together. At the bottom line of it is, our parents, our students, they expect one thing from us. You keep them safe, and we got to do everything we can to make that work.
A lot of people have COVID on their minds. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Are you concerned at all by the resurgence of COVID? And what does that mean for the safety, students and staff here?
So I'm always concerned about that, and I think everyone should be concerned because again, it's going to take a true collaboration to navigate our way out of this. And I go back to what I said before: is we have got to model the way for our students and for our parents, that come onto our campus, wearing your mask, social distancing. I just recently presented to the school board a visitors policy. And as you know, it's very strict. We do not want people on the campus for anything other than official, very important business. And when you come on our campus, you're going to have to screen in. There's a series of questions that you have to answer. You're going to get your temperature taken. If you can't meet the standards, you're not coming on the campus. And again, we all have to be driven towards that one mission of keeping our children safe. And COVID-19 is no exception. And so we have to be diligent in this. And the challenge right now is people are getting tired of having to wear face masks and those type of things. This is when it's most important that we keep driving home the importance of doing what we're doing.
And certainly, as Dr. Alonso pointed out during the school board meeting, she said that a lot of the COVID transmission had been happening in the community. And so, of course, when the students are coming or when staff members or whoever is coming onto campus, that's where you then see that count go up. Anything you want to say, as a member of our leadership, to be smart during this next week that people are off? Because, again, people are letting their guard down.
They're letting their guard down. And I understand it. But you have to think not only about yourself, but you have to think about all those people that you impact, when you come back. And even in the screening process, we expect you to be honest and truthful when you're answering the questions, about, whether or not you've been, anywhere near anyone that's had COVID-19 or showing signs or symptoms. The challenge we have is sometimes we get folks that aren't even honest answering those.
Yeah.
And so, we all have to work together on this because it's not just ourselves that we're worried about, it's everyone around us.
I want to go back to your officers who, again, are making those connections with students on campuses. Would you say that some of them are surprised by how much they're connecting with these kids and how much they're becoming heroes to some of these students? Again, it doesn't have to be a first grader or second grader. It's really up to high school students that are really making it, getting impacted by them.
That's the one thing I hear most often from our officers is how rewarding this job is to them. And so when I talk about going down the hall by yourself, they have a personal stake. This is their family. This is, they live with these folks every single day. And yes, they are really touched by what happened. I mean, you get in some of our schools, like we had an officer, they had the big prize for the students was lunch with the officer. And so they all had raffle tickets for things that they could have won or picked out. And majority of them picked having lunch at the same table with the officer. And then, you go down the hall, and this before COVID, but the officers walk down the hall and students are hugging them. And you get to the high schools and the officers are fist bumping and high-fiving and and it's a whole different approach, to protecting our children. And another thing I hear pretty regularly is, especially in high schools, when the police are not the favorite, these students will say something negative about the police, and they'll quickly come back and goes, but not you. We don't include you in that. And so even though we're wearing the badge and the uniform, so I think that speaks volumes about the relationships. It's a very rewarding job. It's a hard job. It's a heavy lift, but it's so rewarding.
Mary Shirley is asking us a question, and hopefully we understand it. Do all schools, pre-K private boarding, have to follow the same restrictions or rules that Palm Beach County puts in place? I guess she might be asking about the COVID restrictions that we put, or not restrictions, but the guidelines and protocols that we put in our place.
So there's a couple of parts to the answer to that. So the COVID restrictions, if you're not a Palm Beach County school, You may not have to. You don't have to follow those. We strongly recommend that you do. I mean, they're very sound policies. Now, the other parts to those, as a school safety specialist, I'm also responsible to ensure that our 51 or 52 charters in our county, charter schools, follow the the guidelines from Senate Bill 7030, Senate Bill 7026, threat assessment teams, all of that stuff. And so in that regard, yes, you do have to follow those. And I'm happy to report that all of our charters follow those guidelines.
On that note, because I've heard you talk about it, because some people were asking whether fire drills and code red drills were still going on. Are they still going on, and what is the success with that?
So yes, they are still going on. It's very important for those that are on campus. We've worked with our partners at the state level, and we've been able to develop a hybrid of how we do our drills. There are required movement drills, but there are also room for classroom drills that don't require the movement and limit our COVID-19 exposure. And a lot of that is done through education, simulation, those type of things. But those drills do go on, and they're very, very important.
You know, recently you actually had one of the state officials come into the Technical Operations Center and meet with you. What was the feedback that we had received, and where do you think, I guess, is on your wish list of what you want to get done?
So the feedback was actually it was great, as a matter of fact. My impression is, and I don't want to speak for other people, is that they were very surprised at the level of security, the level of technology, the sharing of information, real-time understanding of what's happening in our district, and the fact that it's all being monitored from the Tactical Operations Center, and our ability to interact from that point. I think they were all very impressed with that, and so that's really good for us. I wish I could bring every parent in there. Obviously, I can't, to show them what's there, so that look, they're trusting us with their most valuable resource in the whole world, the most valuable possession in the whole world, and that's their children. And I wish I could show them how we do business, and to the levels we go to protect their loved ones. And but the general response was very impressive, and so that's good. I mean, we don't do it for the credit, we don't do it for the accolades. We do it because we want people to be safe, and we want you to feel safe. And it's two different things.
There was two incidents that come to mind where, again, code red, I believe, was called. But again, everyone responded so appropriately. Anything you want to say about, because again, it's not just your team, it's that collaboration with our schools, the school staff, and how well they're doing to not only prepare, but to execute what you're teaching them.
Yeah, our principals are amazing. Our school staff is amazing. The level of commitment. I'll give you an example. I think most people probably heard about that gas explosion that happened near the turnpike, and so this is a great example of collaboration on all fronts. So that event happened. We embed one of our officers into the unified command post there. As the officers there, it's decided that there's probably about a 2-mile radius around that blast zone that they want to evacuate. So from the Tactical Operations Center, we can quickly leverage our software to establish that 2-mile radius. We found that one of our elementary schools was inside that radius. And so it became important for us then to get those students out of there. It's about 600 students on the campus at the time. The principal and her staff were amazing. The transportation folks were incredible. And so through the Tactical Operations Center, we were able to rally up 11 school buses to transport those children off the campus to the reunification site. From the time we requested the school buses, we can monitor them all on the board, to the time we were picking up the first students was 45 minutes. Wow. That's pretty remarkable. And so we moved everyone off that campus to the reunification site. And this next part shows you how committed our principals are. That principal thought about, well, if I'm one of these elementary school children and I'm going to a different place, I probably want to see a familiar face. So they took their reunification team and sent them to the reunification site ahead of the students arriving. Students came, orderly, made sure everybody was okay. We notified the parents through the communications department, and parents were all queued up and ready to pick up their kids. Buses arrived, kids were safe, parents came in. From the time of the explosion to the time of the last student was reunified was a little less than 5 hours, which is really quite remarkable to accomplish that from A to Z, and it was a real team effort.
Yep, a true testament of that collaboration that we have between the police department and also our schools. Kind of in closing, Chief, I just want to ask you, where is there more work that needs to be done? And then kind of like, once you leave, which I hope is not anytime soon, what kind of legacy would you hope that you would have left?
So that's really a great question. There's always a lot of work left to be done. As good as we were in that last event that I described, there's always room for improvement. And so we're working closely with our principals and our staff and on reunification and getting that really sound in case of an emergency, how we take our students and reunite them with our parents in a timely manner, how we get information to our parents during a crisis, all those types of things. The police department itself is on a journey from good to great, meaning good organizations do all the big things well, great organizations do all the big things and all the little things well. And we are the 10th largest school district in the United States, and we're going to set the benchmark for excellence in school-based policing in this country. And that is our goal, and we're on that journey. And so in terms of legacy, I'm working diligently to build the future. In our hiring, we hire, a mix of experienced and new to get those young faces in, and someday, and I don't think it's going to be anytime soon. Only the good Lord knows that. But my goal on the legacy piece is to leave something behind that will continue to keep our children safe and build so that we can face whatever future challenges come our way. It's quite a journey.
Thank you, Chief. Really, it is a pleasure having you here to be able to answer questions from the public. If you'd like to learn more about the police department, you could go to palmbeachschools.org/schoolpolice. There's information there, also about hiring for anyone that is looking for a job here with the school police department. Again, Chief, a pleasure to have you here. And again, thank you everyone for joining us on this special edition of Going the Distance Together.